Welcome to the Edgevana Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Thiele, and joining me today is Mark Imbriaco. Mark, am I pronouncing that properly? I've known you for years.
You got it just right.
Excellent. I just realized I don't think I'd ever said it out loud.
It intimidates a lot of people. Don't feel bad.
All right. Well, thank you. And Mark is Senior Director for Engineering at Epic Games. Mark, thank you very much for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You work in a really interesting space that's tied to a lot of stuff, some of which you can't talk about, unfortunately, because the industry is really exploding in all things entertainment and engagement. And even as we were hinting before the show started, the notion of remoteness has impacted your work and work that's similar in huge ways over the last couple of years. So really, really exciting and scary time all at the same time. So before I get into, talking about some themes, tell me a little bit about, what a day in the life is for Mark. How'd you start and what do you do on a daily basis at Epic?
Sure. Maybe my quick background is I've been doing internet stuff for about 25 years, going back to, the sort of old trope, dropped out of college to start a startup with some friends back in the mid 90s.
Nice.
And spent a bunch of time working at internet companies. And where it really gets interesting is kind of the mid 2000s, where I joined a company called 37 Signals at the time. Now they're called Basecamp. And I was excited about Ruby on Rails. And I was excited about the sort of step change that it made in terms of how we build and develop online apps. I was a web developer at the time.
Nice.
So I've been kind of excited about enabling developers ever since, and that sort of has been the arc of my career for the last 15 years. So I left Basecamp and went to a company called Heroku, building platform as a service, and I was a very early employee there. I led the operations team, and we took the platform from when I joined about 60,000 applications to a year and a half later, 1.5 million applications on the platform. So just a little bit of growth.
Yeah, okay.
And I won't bore you with my whole resume, but I went to places like GitHub and DigitalOcean, and I was really focused on this idea of enabling developers. Fast forward a few years later, I did my own startup, didn't work out, and I took a job after that, and then I was sort of looking for what's next, right? I had recovered from the startup experience, and I was kind of looking for what's next. And I saw a PostMortem blog post on the Epic blog about a really big outage they had. And it was interesting because I've written a lot of those over my career. And I guess it's kind of a hobby to read them. And I read the PostMortem. I was like, this is really well done. And wait, they said they're hiring. And I know all these things. And kind of the rest is history. So I've been at Epic for about 4 years now, and I lead our cloud infrastructure and data engineering teams. The data part's brand new, as in the last couple of weeks, but I've sort of led our infrastructure team for the last couple of years. And what that really means is my teams provide the platform tech that our internal developers use to deliver things like Fortnite and the Epic Games Store and Epic Online Services to all the customers and other developers who make use of it around the world.
That's awesome. Fortnite, is that a popular game? I mean,
it turns out, and it's even more popular in a pandemic, as you might expect.
I believe it. Yeah, I had to, just as an aside, before we get into the meat of the conversation here, I used to be a big Call of Duty fan and to some degree Halo fan.
Yeah.
And I would have been a Fortnite fan for sure. And the only reason I'm not is because I had to literally go cold turkey. Because I was like telling my wife, "Oh no, I just can't sleep." "Why are you up at 4 a.m? "Yeah, I just can't sleep, honey." And I'd be downstairs playing, games until everybody else in the house was awake. And
nice.
And it just, I enjoyed it. I do, but I found I was finding more and more of my free time was not necessarily free time that I was finding to play games, and decided maybe I need to back off. So I've got a game controller in my game room now that hasn't had anybody on it for probably 5 or 6 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We all approach games in a different way. I've been a gamer forever. So before Epic even, games have kind of always been that escape for me that reduces stress and kind of gives me something else to do. And I take that really seriously, right? I think a lot of people, I've worked on a bunch of things that people care about and that they care about when they're down. people are like, why do you want to work on games? Nobody really cares. I was like, no, actually, you're completely wrong. People really care when games are down. In fact, my favorite scenario is okay, I had a bad day at work. I get home. The one thing I'm looking forward to all day is playing a couple of games with some friends. And then the game I want to play is down. Now my whole day is ruined. It was already bad. I had one thing I was looking forward to, and now that's gone too.
Yep. No, and I've been there. I've been in that exact spot. And for me, I agree with everything you just said. For me, it's just it got to the point where in the game that I was playing the most, I realized that I didn't actually enjoy the game anymore.
Yeah,
I had this thing that I was doing where it was like I just somehow had to beat the guys I didn't beat yesterday, even though I was never playing the same guys over and over again. And so it was this never-ending effort to get to a top of a mountain that didn't actually exist.
I had the same problem. I used to play Overwatch the same way, and I just had to stop because it stopped being fun. It was only about competition, and it wasn't about having a good time anymore. So I had to stop playing that game. So I can completely relate. I think it's interesting though, like games these days, especially in, we hear a lot about the metaverse lately, and I don't think the metaverse is the Mark Zuckerberg wearing a headset in a board meeting, because that's silly. I think the metaverse really is about online experiences becoming more social and more connected and more online over time. And Fortnite really is a manifestation of that. I think I tell the story all the time. My son and my nephew used to play Fortnite every day, and they weren't really playing Fortnite. They were talking. They were hanging out in the game together, and Fortnite was kind of the background music. Right. And I think that's really powerful.
I agree, and I completely agree with your abbreviated definition of metaverse. And in fact, a good friend of mine is the CEO for a company that builds metaverse for other companies, and I would argue that he would likely have said almost the same exact thing you did. It really is about creating an opportunity to develop real memorable experiences with other people when you can't actually be in person with them. So it's,
absolutely,
good stuff. So exciting stuff. And you and I have known each other for a long time. I can't remember when we first met. I don't know if it was when I was at Brocade in 06, 07, or if when I was at VMware, but I think it was somewhere
it's been
around
a long
that
time.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I've watched your career develop, and the work you're doing at Epic is amazing. And one of these days, I hope I'll get a chance to visit whatever an office is at some point in the future.
Yeah, you could take a trip down the slide.
Yeah, I like it. We don't even have an office. I don't know if we're going to have an office. We'll see. But so, you've been at Epic for 4 years now, but your background, and you hinted at this, your background wasn't actually in gaming. Tell me a little bit about why you joined Epic. Obviously you liked the blog about their failure and the postmortem. And I agree. I've been around a lot of postmortems, and people do them badly, and some people do them great. And like most smart people would say, the best postmortem is not only fully transparent, but doesn't blame a bunch of people.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, tell me, what it was about that got you started and have kept you there.
Yeah, so the postmortem is what got my interest, right? I think it's because I've spoken at conferences about this. I've written about this topic. I've got a formula for what a good public postmortem looks like, right? There's sort of three things it has to do. Number one, apologize and mean it. Number two, explain what happened. And number three, tell us what you're going to do about it. The Epic one hit the formula perfectly, and went out of its way not to blame, gave enough technical detail to keep people interested, all those things. It did it very well. Nice. So that got me interested. I happen to live in the same town that Epic's in. I had some friends who worked at Epic, actually, who had reached out to me a year before Fortnite became popular. And when I looked at the blog post or the postmortem, the thing that struck me was these are all technologies that I'm comfortable with and places where I can contribute, and is at a meaningful scale that's interesting to me. And so that's what got me interested to start with. The more I dug in, the more interested I got. And the more I sort of realized that Fortnite's not really just a game company. Fortnite's a technology company, or Epic's a technology company. Fortnite's just one of the products we offer. In fact, I would say Epic is really focused on empowering creators, whether that's through the Unreal Engine and game developers, right? So while Fortnite's a gigantic game, if you look at the sheer number of top titles that are built on our technology, we're pretty dominant. And that technology is increasingly used in lots of other places and lots of other industries, which I also found super interesting, right? So things like when you're waiting for a hurricane to hit the East Coast and you're looking at these weather channel visualizations with the water rising, all that's powered by our engine. And in the new Rivian electric pickup that I ordered, the infotainment system is powered by our engine.
Wow.
So if you watch The Mandalorian, a lot of that work was orchestrated by our engine. So our engine is increasingly used in lots of other industries in places that are super interesting, far beyond games. So I found that interesting. The other thing that I thought was fascinating was the opportunity to take that focus on empowering creators and extend it to backend services as well. So we released something called Epic Online Services, which really is all about taking many of the ideas and technologies that we use to power the backend of Fortnite and offering it to third-party developers to use in their games for free. Epic's a company ultimately that's about empowering creators and being disruptive. So I was really excited that, I shared before that the arc of my career has been about empowering developers. Epic Online Services really got me excited about that because it gives me reach through our products to the entire industry that's building games and experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's a great explanation and frankly, a great reason to join. Although I'm not a developer, I'm more on the infrastructure side. Those same themes would appeal to me in a big way. So,
yeah, and I've been both the developer side and primarily the infrastructure side for many years now. I think the other part that I skipped was the fact that while I have a comfort zone, right, the infrastructure stuff is I understand it, I know it very well. There's a whole lot of things I have no idea about, so I get to learn new things all the time. I am almost never the smartest person in the room, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, that pretty much always is the case for me. So, yeah, I can sympathize.
If I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to do better hiring.
There you go. Couldn't agree more. So, we touched on the idea of platforms, and I don't want to go into a long-winded approach on what is a platform or at what level of in a total environment a platform exists or the platform exists. But I'd love to get your perspective on the value of platforms where you work, and specifically, where those platforms add the most value.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I could wax philosophical about it, and the place where I'm at today is the entire infrastructure is the platform. Whether you understand that or not, I think different people are at different stages of understanding that. But the reality is everybody has a platform. Whether they have product management discipline around it is a different topic. So to me, the place where the opportunity exists for sort of these new platforms is around improving the velocity of our developers. At the end of the day, that's the primary purpose that we're going after. We want to allow developers and product teams to move from idea to something realized in the world as rapidly as possible, while not kind of losing track of all of the guardrails that we need from a business point of view, right? So we can deliver things quickly, and we can still meet all the objectives we have around compliance and reliability and operational maturity and discipline and all those things by codifying that and sort of building a golden path for our developers that allows them to deliver code rapidly. So I think at the end of the day, there's a few things platforms are about. It's really about speed to market. It's about reducing cognitive load on developers so they have fewer things to think about and more abstractions to work with, and allowing us to move more quickly, more safely.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you think about platforms, platforms are sort of the manifestation, the physical and digital manifestation of good practices. Right.
Absolutely.
And you could call that DevOps. You could call it procedures. You could call it all of the above. But what do I've always been impressed with the opportunity of platforms, and one of the reasons why I joined Service Mesh in 2010, cloud management platform, was because of many of the things you talked about. When I joined Apsera for their container management platform, same sort of thing. What do you see as, in general, and maybe this is two questions, that people still miss from an opportunity standpoint associated with their platform? And I'm happy you could take it either way. Like you could say, oh, they miss security, or they miss this, or they miss that. Or you could spend a little bit more time talking about what you hinted at in the beginning, which is the fact that, I shouldn't say the fact, my opinion, from my experience, is that most people still don't see their environment as an ecosystem of supporting systems, right? And if you, pardon my French, F with one system, you F with all of them. And so understanding how they play together and how they deliver your answers is really critical to getting, maximizing that benefit and using it for all its value, right?
And not just maximizing the benefit, it's critical for realizing any benefit at all, right? I think there's a lot of, I've actually been having a bunch of conversations this week with some friends around this topic and around sort of what is the business value of a platform and what are the pitfalls that people run into when they try to create platforms in their organizations. And I think one of the things that's interesting is platforms almost never are truly greenfield, and there's always this legacy stuff that you need to make a decision about. Are you going to leave it in the old place forever? Are you going to move it into the platform? If you don't think about those things while you're developing the platform, you're implicitly making decisions rather than accepting that the entire platform includes all that legacy stuff. You don't get to walk away from that when you build the new thing. And there's some anti-patterns. There's a really interesting one that I was discussing this week with some folks, which is around this idea of, okay, great. We talked about how platforms can really be an enabler for driving better policy conformance in your organization, right? And that's great. And it's also true. But the pitfall there is if you decide that, okay, great, we're going to build a platform and we've got all these policies that nobody's ever adhered to before. But suddenly, now that we've got the platform, we're going to start enforcing all of them. Now you just made the thing that's supposed to be attractive and easy to use much more difficult to consume by people. So, if I were to sum all these, that's just one example, right? But the sort of core problem here is not centering the platform on the developers. If you don't center it on the developers' needs, you shouldn't do it in the first place because you're not really doing anything but creating infrastructure for the sake of creating infrastructure. And I like infrastructure, but it doesn't provide any value if there's not applications running on it.
No, absolutely. And the core to me, because I love infrastructure too. That's my bread and butter. And that's what I help other people with. But the core to modern infrastructure, which is only being further exacerbated through, the availability of cloud, the distribution requirements of edge, the distribution requirements of blockchain, pick your poison. Digital transformation, logistics, supply chains, all those things are causing greater and greater distribution, and recognizing that you can't have uniqueness in how to consume for your application deployment is really critical. It doesn't necessarily mean, I'm not trying to say that you have to have all Lenovo or all Supermicro that have the exact same drivers and the exact same NIC cards and the exact same kernels and all that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you're going to have those things distributed, then you have to be able to consume them the same way with the same expectations from the developers.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're not doing your job. Yeah.
No, you're exactly right. You have to have a consistent abstraction that your developers can work against, right? And even more, they need to not care about whether you're running on Supermicro or Lenovo or AWS or Google or anything else, right? They shouldn't have to care about that. I want them to know about infrastructure a little bit more. I want them to understand how the system works to a degree because they need to troubleshoot it. But day to day, they shouldn't have to care.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So you can just push back because this isn't one of the themes that we talked about discussing.
Come at me.
But I see the future expanding even further from a benefit to developer standpoint. In that, even today, even if you and I and everyone else agrees with everything we just said, right, about what the life for the developer should be versus what the infrastructure should provide, there's still the distance between being able to build an application and have the application actually be smart enough to consume the resource that's appropriate for the application. Do you see anything either as an opportunity or in actual working deployment where AI or rules-based application development, et cetera, is actually enabling that kind of capability?
Sometimes, right? I think a good example of that is our Fortnite game server fleet. We run Fortnite game servers around the world in 30 plus availability zones for AWS and Google Cloud and all over the place. And it's an extremely large, one of the top AWS infrastructures in the world. Um, and it scales up and down based on player demand and some other heuristics. And it's important that it do that. Otherwise, we'd be out of business. There's a feedback loop there that's not driven by humans driving scaling knobs because it's not feasible for humans to drive scaling knobs at that level. Right. Is that AI or machine learning? Not yet. Some places make more use of that. We actually probably could, but it turns out, I prefer to look at the simplest possible solution that could work. So we looked at this problem and we're like, are there some simple heuristics that we can put in place that give us 90% of the value without all the complexity of machine learning and AI. And we found some knobs that worked for us around, rate of players coming in and time of day and whether the curve is going up and down. So some pretty simple heuristics and logic baked into our system that helps us scale appropriately. I definitely think there's a lot of work to be done in this space. I think auto scaling is definitely the future. And if you're in the cloud and you're not auto scaling, you're doing it wrong. Like if you're not taking advantage of elasticity, you shouldn't be there.
Right.
But if you are, your economies will be great.
Right. That literally is the point. Not the point, but certainly one of the biggest points of being on cloud in the first place is that you have applications that benefit from the kind of elasticity and scale capabilities that cloud provides, both in
almost any application can, right? I think that's the thing.
That's right. And not a lot of applications actually need it. Your finance application for your company may go from using 10 servers on Monday to using 12 on Friday, but that doesn't mean you need to scale globally to support it, right? I wasn't as descriptive as I probably should have been, but in my question, I was also looking for, you're thinking about because auto scaling is a clear opportunity space, and although we've been talking about it for 12 years, 13 years now, it's still not something that is executed well and commonly by companies all over the world. And we still see problems with it. Somebody dies or somebody births or whatever, and we still see things failing because it wasn't designed properly. I was actually thinking more along the lines of and this is where the context is probably important, is that applications, whether they're using multiple chipsets, and maybe those chipsets aren't always required for all functions of the application, or the application will literally instantiate itself in a new location on its own, based on demand, and find the appropriate hardware and latencies and things like that that it can use, over and above saying, yes, I use this type of EC2 instance and this type of Google instance, et cetera, and I want 1,000 more of those when this happens. What do you see, in those, like the little bit more deeper detail of being able to actually selectively in real time pick, no, I need to be on this GPU right now, and I need 1,000 of them, or I need to have FPGAs, and they need to be, from Xilinx or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think that's not a new problem. I think and I also think that that's not so much from a consumer, from an application developer point of view. I don't think that's a dynamic problem. I think that's hey, I'm going to deploy my application. My application needs an FPGA or it needs to be on a GPU. That's a deploy time decision by that developer. I think on the other side, on sort of if you're a cloud provider or you're operating infrastructure at scale, understanding what the requirements are of the app are in real time and placing workloads and potentially moving workloads is super powerful, right? I can imagine, for example, you could imagine a world where an application doesn't need a GPU instance, but there's a GPU instance that's free. Why not put the workload there versus spinning up another host somewhere? And move it around later if you need that GPU for something else. So those use cases definitely exist.
So, all this is sort of aligned, Mark, with this idea of central infrastructure, but also with the kind of the two themes wrapped together at the end of our conversation here, of Lockin. So what do you see as the importance or the role of central infrastructure? And because it just doesn't seem to go away, you could be locked into legacy infrastructure. You could be locked into using Windows. You could be locked into being on an IBM server. You could be locked into being on AWS cloud. That argument doesn't seem to go away. How would you define that argument and its opportunity or risk?
Yeah, it's definitely a risk. I think it's interesting. I think at the end of the day, you need to look at, when you're thinking about lock-in, it's not just about lock-in. Lock-in doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Lock-in results from the choices you make about the services you consume from your infrastructure partner, whether that's internal, whether that's a cloud provider, doesn't really matter. And there's trade-offs. It's not a black and white lock-in is bad game. I think the approach that many people take, and I think the sort of platonic ideal for cloud, in my opinion, is you should make use of all of the affordances that your cloud provider gives you. Because if you're not taking advantage of the agility that you get from operating in the cloud, you are probably hurting your business outcomes. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. If we can't deliver business outcomes faster by being in the cloud, if we don't gain agility by being in the cloud, why are we doing it? At the end of the day. So I tend to discount the lock-in argument to a degree. I do think that there's a place for the lock-in conversation still, even in the world where you're consuming most of the affordances that your cloud provider offers. And I think that a lot of workloads are probably pretty undifferentiated, and being deliberate about which ones are going to consume, say, DynamoDB versus running in your own database, is important to consider so that you can maintain some leverage in that relationship with your partners.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't know if I've come full circle. Many of us that have been around a long time, and sad to say, I've been around even longer than you. We come from the days when people were terrified of the fact that Microsoft owned everything, and even before that IBM owned everything. I was on the tail end of that part of the world. And if you're in the application space inside your company, you might have been terrified of the stranglehold that a company like Oracle had on application development and hardware design and so on and so forth. I have horror stories about upgrades of Oracle and decisions made on hardware that cost a lot more, specifically because that was the only stuff that could support the Oracle environment. So lock-in has its different pain points, but I completely agree with you that making the choice with eyes wide open is what's key, and then leveraging what's available to you while you're there, because cloud isn't, and this may be an oversimplification of what you were saying, but cloud isn't accidentally better. Cloud isn't accidentally cheaper. Cloud may be fundamentally more valuable to your company, regardless of what you pay for it, when you use it properly.
That's right.
But just moving shit from one place to another doesn't equate to lower cost or more opportunity.
Hey, lift and shift is a bad idea. It's always been a bad idea. It's still a bad idea. I think it's interesting, right? I think there's lots of factors that play into this. And for what it's worth, I've come full circle in the lock-in conversation as well. I used to be scared of it. Now I'm not anymore. And I think part of the realization there is that you're always locked into something. Like, okay, great. It used to be I'm locked into this storage tech array that I bought. And then it was, okay, I'm locked into this compute vendor that I've built all my automation around so that I can deploy hardware quickly. And then it's, I'm locked into this, RAID card. There's lots of things you can be locked into. I choose to be locked into the infrastructure provider because me providing the value at the infrastructure layer doesn't actually move the needle for the business. I would much rather spend my time and energy and people on building things that allow us to consume those resources better and quicker and manage our costs and understand what's happening and move the business more quickly. And this is part of the advantage of platforms. It's not nirvana. People will try to tell you that, you should if you just run a platform on top of it, suddenly your workload is portable from AWS to Google. And it's nonsense. It's not true. It's never been true. The boring parts of your application might be portable, but let's talk about data and your application structure and then get back to me. It's possible to build those fully portable applications, but almost nobody does it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, it's funny, I really overuse this. So I apologize to anybody that's heard me say this 5 times or more already. But It takes me to the point I make about Netflix all the time, and it's like it's been 13 years maybe since Netflix became famous as this global deployment, with their database distribution strategy and failover strategy by region and all that kind of stuff using Cassandra, all on Amazon. And there's a reason why so many people still talk about it. Yep. They talk about it because it's hard to do. And a lot of people think they're going to do it or want to do it, but don't. And your choices set the table for your movement, right? And if your choices are that you're going to own the infrastructure, then you need to be just as purposeful about that as you do about deciding to go all in with AWS or Google or somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, man, this has been fun. And I wish we had more time, Mark. We're going to have to do this again, maybe in 6 months or something. And I hope now that COVID seems to be, leaving through the back door, that we find an opportunity to get together in person again sometime in the near future. Where are you living these days, by the way?
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina in the Raleigh area.
Okay, so you're still there. I thought you were. Well, the closest thing I have to an office is 3 of the folks that work for me live in Virginia. Okay. Almost the neighborhood.
So I grew up in Virginia, so.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I can figure out a way to squeeze in a visit. But
I'm sure I'll be in Vegas sometime because I can't seem to avoid it.
Absolutely. Make sure you look me up.
Sounds good.
Mark, thank you very much for joining the program. And for those who want to keep up with what you do, where do they find you, on Twitter or on LinkedIn?
Either one. My name is my Twitter handle, and the way you can find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And then, folks, if you're interested in any new topics for the Edgevana podcast, please let me know, as well as if you have any guest suggestions. Love to get those, and it's just podcast@edgevana.com. Again, Mark, thank you very much, and until next time.
Hey, thanks for having me.